Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out today to join us for today's webinar. Um, Today is Thursday, April 27th. We are on the record. This recording will be made available to you after. This afternoon, we will be briefing the report on PVC plastic pipes and the risks to our environment and drinking water. We have 3 speakers with us today, and I will introduce them each as they come. We ask that you hold all of your questions until the very end. At this time, the chat is disenabled, and so we ask that you hold the questions to the end, and I'll give you instructions at that time as well. Let's see what else. I am Angela Marie Hutchinson. I am your moderator for this afternoon. I serve as the engagement director at Environmental Health Sciences, where I oversee our journalism, our public outreach, as well as all of our mainstream media activities. At this time, I have the honor of introducing our first speaker. She is a force, as many of you know. Judith Inc. is the founder and president of Beyond Plastics and is a professor at Bennington College in Vermont. Prior to these roles, she was appointed by President Obama to serve as the EPA Regional Administrator for EPA Region 2. She previously served as Deputy Secretary for the Environment in the New York State Governor's Office. Judith will walk you through the report. Judith, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Angela Marie. What an honor to be with Angela Marie Hutchinson with Environmental Health Services and our 2 other amazing speakers, Mike Shade with Toxic Free Future. And also, we're so thrilled to have Dr. Shauna Swan with us, one of the most effective and well-informed scientists in the country. And I want to tell you all that Shauna has this great book that came out last year called Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. She didn't know I would be promoting her book, but I'm happy to do it. It is an amazing book that would be a good follow-up for you. And Shauna was kind enough to do a webinar with Beyond Plastics, which I believe the recording is up on our website, May 12th, 2021. And one other quick thing I want to mention is if you are from New York State, come and join us in Albany this Tuesday, May 2nd. We're doing a day-long advocacy day meeting with state legislators to urge them to adopt 2 really important plastic reduction laws, and also doing a noontime rally at the Capitol. You need to pre-register so we can pop you into lobby groups with friends. It's super easy. If you've never lobbied before, that's great. You will love it. Information was just dropped in the chat, and you can also get information at our website, beyondplastics.org. So let's see if this will work. This is always the most terrifying part of my presentations. So today we're here to talk about our new report, The Perils of Polyvinyl Chloride PVC Plastic Pipes. We co-published this important report with Environmental Health Sciences and the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and with support from the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, a very prestigious national environmental group, and we appreciate their support for this project. So that is the cover page of the report. It'll be dropped in the chat. It's on our website. We urge you to send it to local mayors, county legislators, anyone in your community, water departments, anyone who's responsible for making decisions about pulling out old lead service lines and then having to make the key decision of what to replace lead service lines with. So that's the report that we released last week. We're here to applaud President Biden's decision to provide, both President Biden and the Congress provided $15 billion to be spent over 5 years in the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act And the purpose of those $15 billion is to take out these babies, lead service lines. These are the big old pipes that deliver drinking water from a water main at the curb of your street and then brings the drinking water into your home or your business. These lead service lines are most likely to be found in older cities and homes built before 1986. The pipes are the most significant source of lead in drinking water. Young children, infants, and fetuses are particularly vulnerable. Exposure to lead can cause learning disabilities, damage to the nervous system. And I view this 15 billion in federal dollars really as a down payment. A nonprofit group called the American Water Works Association estimates that 60 billion is actually needed to replace the estimated lead service lines around the country. EPA says that there are 9.2 million lead service lines throughout the nation, with Florida having the most lead service lines. Florida has 1.16 million. Illinois has over 1 million. Ohio, number 3. Pennsylvania, number 4. Texas, number 5. The great state of New York, number 6. And coming in at number 7 is Tennessee. So those are the states that really need the most attention by the public, by elected officials, because that's where the most lead service lines are. The White House estimates that this is a problem at as many as 10 million homes and 400,000 schools and childcare centers. So my view is that we need to prioritize funding first to go to schools and childcare centers where our children spend so much time. The way the money will flow is EPA is sending these federal tax dollars to the states, and we need to make sure that when the local governments decide to remove lead service lines, that they are not replacing the pipes with PVC plastic pipes, which is made from vinyl chloride, or CPVC pipes, which is a chlorinated polyvinyl chloride. Beyond Plastics is recommending that polyvinyl chloride, which I'll just call PVC pipes, and CPVC pipes be avoided for delivering drinking water. The decision on what type of pipe material to be used will be made by local governments, and the public should get involved before these important decisions are made. Polyvinyl chloride, or PVC plastic, is made from the chemical vinyl chloride. Vinyl chloride is mostly used to make PVC plastic. 99% of it is for this purpose worldwide. And it's not just pipes, it's many other materials. Exposure to vinyl chloride is linked to increased risk to the liver, brain, and lung, as well as increased risk of lymphoma and leukemia, according to the National Institute of Health. The federal EPA has classified vinyl chloride as a human carcinogen, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer first declared vinyl chloride to be a carcinogen in 1974. That was 49 years ago. So that same year, in 1974, federal agencies banned the use of this chemical in various consumer products like hairspray and cosmetics, but not for pipes that deliver drinking water to our homes and our schools and our businesses every day. Vinyl chloride has since been linked to other health problems, and Dr. Swan will speak to that momentarily. Vinyl chloride was one of the toxic chemicals burned from 5 train cars that derailed in East Palestine, Ohio on February 3rd. You're probably all very familiar with this iconic picture. Beyond Plastics on our website also has a video chronicling the situation on the ground in East Palestine. And I want to say that the problems continue, and we cannot forget about the residents of East Palestine and nearby Western Pennsylvania who are still struggling with the impacts of not the derailment, but the decision to burn 5 train cars containing vinyl chloride. PVC is the worst of the worst plastics. The US Plastics Pact said this, not me. And the US Plastics Pact is made up of NGOs and also large companies, including Nestle, Clorox, Walmart, and Coke. All of those companies have agreed to stop using PVC for packaging by 2025. We applaud them for that, but also I want to point out that you and I come into contact with drinking water far more than we come in contact with packaging. PVC and CPVC pipes are constructed with dozens of additive chemicals, some of which are known endocrine disruptors, such as organotins and potentially phthalates. According to the EPA, drinking water may contain vinyl chloride released from contact with polyvinyl pipes. Independent researchers have also confirmed this. And that is what we are here to talk about today. When people say that plastics is cheap, they're wrong. The price is paid widely and for decades, often through healthcare costs and our tax dollars. In the months and in the years ahead, this new federal money will be flowing to state and local governments. And unfortunately, the federal EPA is not providing any guidance on what is a safe substitute for lead pipes. They could, but the EPA has chosen not to. Beyond Plastics is recommending that local governments avoid using PVC plastic as a replacement for lead pipes. Suitable alternatives include unlined copper pipes, preferably recycled copper, or stainless steel. Local governments should look at alternatives to PVC pipes. This was done in Newark, New Jersey, where they replaced all 23,000 lead service lines within 3 years. And Newark, New Jersey replaced their lead pipes with copper pipes. And that was a community where the public and the environmental community got very involved in that discussion. But there was no guidance from the EPA or states on what local governments should be using. We recommend avoiding PVC and CPVC because independent researchers have documented roughly 30 to 60 different toxic chemicals. 30 to 60 different toxic chemicals released by PVC and CPVC pipes and their fittings. While individual chemicals have generally been found at very low levels, we just don't know enough about the health significance of exposure to complex chemical mixtures, and many of the chemicals that have been found target the same organ system. I have this slide up because endocrine disrupting chemicals, organotins and phthalates in particular, have been documented leaching from PVC or CPVC pipes, and these chemicals are biologically active at extremely low levels in parts per trillion. Once these drinking water pipes are installed, people will be getting their water from them for many decades, sometimes 100 years. Yet no one can say how well plastic pipes will hold up over the 100 years that they are in service. Research out just this month shows that disinfectants can age plastic pipes and release microplastics and chemicals into drinking water. Further, when PVC pipes burn during house fires or from wildfires, they release even more hazardous chemicals into drinking water. Benzene in particular has been found at levels well above what the EPA considers safe in water systems. And PVC is found in a number of different household construction materials, not just pipes. On average, 2.5 million homes are within 2 miles of a wildfire every year in the United States. When PVC burns, they pose a particular risk to firefighters and first responders. There are just too many questions about the safety of PVC pipes, and some better alternatives exist. EPA needs to conduct thorough research on the nature of all liberated chemicals from plastic pipes, the stability of the pipes when they're under assault from microbes or chlorination, and the importance of water variables on the process. Some logical questions that you might have. First, don't federal drinking water standards protect us from this problem? Well, not exactly. Drinking water standards apply at the point that the water enters the distribution system. So right when the water has been treated and leaves a reservoir area or a water facility, not at the tap of your home. Second, doesn't the EPA certify that the pipes are safe? No, that role is played by a private organization called NSF International. They certify pipes, and the certification is paid for by the companies that make the pipes. The states rely on this private group to set exposure standards, and the organization's review committee has pipe industry representatives on their committees. They decide which pipes are certified, with the companies paying for certification. The process is not transparent. Test results from NSF International are not made available to the public. We would not expect drug companies, for instance, to pay a private organization to test and approve their vaccines and drug products for safety and efficacy. That's the role of the Food and Drug Administration. We would not expect coal companies to establish standards for coal plants. So why is it okay for the companies that make pipes pay for their product certification and have a private organization set the standards for pipes that deliver drinking water? Drinking water quality is pretty important, and what I just described should be the role of government. And this point is very important. PVC manufacturing, transportation can be a risk for nearby communities. It's not just for people who are consuming water from the pipes. I really want to urge you to focus on where the PVC is manufactured. It's mostly made in Louisiana, Texas, and Kentucky, in low-income communities and communities of color, where there is a concentration of petrochemical facilities, making this issue a very significant environmental justice issue. Why use PVC plastic pipes? Some think it's cheaper. That's what you might hear from local governments, but that's misleading. The major cost on these projects when you're removing lead service lines is the costs of labor and ripping up the sidewalk and the road, not necessarily the cost of the pipes. Smart cities are calibrating the lead service line replacement projects when they are doing things like new street paving. The type of pipe that is used is a smaller part of the full project cost. There are fewer, more important roles for local governments than providing clean drinking water. Every mayor, every city council member, every local water department should read this report and learn more about the issue. Equally important, we call on local officials and states to consult with local residents. Lay out the pros and the cons of each pipe material. This report is 53 pages. It is well documented with 106 footnotes. It's not hard to read. We want to err on the side of caution. So thanks to the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, Bloomberg Philanthropies Beyond Petrochemicals campaign, and others for their support of this work.
Thank you, Judith. At this time, I would like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Shauna Swan. Dr. Swan is one of the world's leading environmental and reproductive epidemiologists and a professor at environmental medicine and public health at Mount Sinai in New York City. She is the author of the recent book, Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. Dr. Swan is also a senior scientist at Environmental Health Sciences. She will be speaking about the human health impacts of PVC plastic. Dr. Swan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening. Angela Marie, thank you for your introduction, and thank you, colleagues at Beyond Plastic and Environmental Health Sciences, for compiling this excellent and needed report and organizing this webinar. So we're here tonight to discuss the composition of water service lines, which can expose the household to the contents of those lines and the chemicals from which they are made, as Judith has so well described. There's no question that lead exposure is a serious health hazard. It causes damage to the brain and the nervous system, slows growth and development, and lowers IQ. As a scientist who is deeply concerned about public health, I applaud the Biden administration and Congress for their decision to provide funding to remove lead-containing service lines. But the question we're here to discuss is what should replace these? Based on the results of considerable research, the choice of these materials will have a large impact on human health. And today I want to talk to you about my concerns about the possibility of replacing these lead lines with plastic piping, particularly PVC. This would be swapping out one serious public health threat with another, or as it is sometimes called, regrettable substitution. So why am I concerned? Well, let's start with PVC itself. Polyvinyl chloride, which is commonly found in a range of everyday products, piping, but also vinyl siding, car parts, raincoats, children's toys, and many more, exposes us to many endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, those chemicals that have the ability to impact our body's own hormones and hormonal function. And that includes phthalates and the bisphenols and organotins and many others. PVC and its components presents us with a huge range of known and suspected health effects, which include impaired fertility and atypical neurodevelopment, things that I study. Effects of these PVC chemicals are serious enough threats that PVC has been removed from many products, but they are still used in water pipes, as well as garden hoses and a wide range of consumer goods. Most 90%, in fact, of the plasticizers that are produced and produced at a huge rate of billions of tons per year, increasing, are used to manufacture flexible PVC. Among these plasticizers are the phthalates, a class of chemicals that are used to give PVC its properties such as softness and flexibility, and these pose a serious health concern. As with all plastic products, the risk that these products can leach chemicals harmful to human health is very real. I've studied these chemicals for most of my career and found serious, measurable impacts on the health and development of our children, and particularly on their reproductive and neurological health. So, what am I most concerned about? Well, of the many chemicals that leach from PVC or can leach from PVC, I'm particularly concerned about the phthalates and the bisphenols. So the phthalates, which make plastic soft and flexible, harm children's health and development by interfering with the body's own hormone system, in particular lowering testosterone, which nobody is in favor of, I think. And so they are classified, as I said, as EDCs. Phthalates have been shown to interfere with reproductive development, to increase the risk of testicular cancer and genital birth defects in baby boys. They have also been shown to lower sperm counts and impair fertility. And a recent Danish study concluded that higher phthalate exposure in pregnancy affects brain development as well, resulting in reduced IQ and other neurological problems in the exposed offspring. And I'm also very concerned about another class of EDCs, and that's the bisphenols. These include BPA, which people are familiar with, but also substitutes such as BPS, BPF, and others. These are also used as additives in PVC, and they add hardness among other properties. They're also toxic to our reproductive health and development. For example, higher concentration of BPA in either the man or the woman, or both, can decrease the chance of success of an IVF and increase the chance of miscarriage. PVC exposure also affects pulmonary function. Here's one example. A Swedish study found that exposure to PVC flooring in early life is related to an increased risk of childhood disease, including asthma. Exposure to these toxic chemicals in PVC is particularly risky during early pregnancy, when rapid cell division is taking place, organs are forming. So for the pregnant women and couples planning a pregnancy, this is of particular concern. So do these chemicals leave the pipes and enter our bodies? Well, this is a question under study, but these chemicals are known to leach from PVC products. For example, the shedding of microplastic particles inside water pipes has been shown to increase consumers' phthalate exposure. While the health risks of microplastic shedding are only now being characterized, a recent study in pregnant mice found that exposure to microplastics during pregnancy resulted in decreased birth weight and reduced fertilization rates in female offspring. So phthalates and bisphenols are just two classes of chemicals in PVC that cause health problems. There are others. For example, organotins, used in PVC as heat stabilizers. They pose multiple health risks, including immunotoxicity, reduced fecundity, and developmental abnormalities. So in closing, exposure to PVC and the toxic chemicals it contains puts exposed communities at risk of a range of known and suspected health effects. These toxic chemicals are particularly risky during early pregnancy, when they can interfere with the body's own hormones and permanently disrupt reproductive and neurodevelopment. As a public health scientist, the prospect of these chemicals leaching into household drinking water is of grave concern to me. The bottom line is, at no time should these chemicals contact our drinking water supply. I'm happy to answer questions about the science to the extent I can when we get to today's Q&A, and I thank you for your interest and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Swan. Our next and final speaker for this afternoon is Mike Shade. Mike is the program director of Mind the Store at Toxic Free Future, a program that challenges the nation's leading retailers to transform the marketplace away from hazardous chemicals and towards safer alternatives. Mike will talk to us about the problems associated with the production of vinyl chloride in environmental justice communities. Mike, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for Beyond Plastics and the other organizations for sponsoring this evening's webinar. So I'm going to talk about, as was noted, the impacts of manufacturing polyvinyl chloride plastic pipes on communities here in the United States. Of course, many of us probably have been watching the news in recent months and saw the horrific train derailment that took place in Ohio, where 5 tanker cars containing vinyl chloride plastic derailed and burned, as well as other train cars containing PVC plastic that also burned. And this disaster really highlights the risks of transporting chemicals that are used to make PVC plastic pipes. We also just recently published this new report, which I'm going to talk about, PVC Poison Plastic, an investigation following the Ohio train derailment of widespread vinyl chloride pollution caused by PVC production. And a thing that we really looked at in this report, which complements the pipes report, is that East Palestine was not an isolated incident. Unfortunately, communities all across the US, day in and day out, are being exposed to the very same chemicals that derailed in Ohio, such as vinyl chloride, which, as Judith noted, is classified as a known human carcinogen by the US EPA. So if we take a look at 2 of the companies that were involved in the derailment in Ohio, Occidental Chemical and Shintech, these are 2 of the largest producers of vinyl chloride and PVC plastic. Both companies release massive amounts of vinyl chloride into the air on an annual basis. Oxy Chemical, who had 3 train cars that derailed and burned, they reported releasing more than 59,000 pounds of vinyl chloride into the air in 2021. Interestingly, this is not the first time that their train cars derailed in an accident. Back in 2012, Oxy train cars, also containing vinyl chloride, derailed in a major disaster in New Jersey, in Paulsboro, New Jersey, releasing a massive plume of vinyl chloride into the air, which sickened dozens of area residents as well as first responders. And interestingly, the train cars in the New Jersey derailment were actually heading to the very same chemical plant that the train cars from Ohio were heading to. So this was the second time that a train derailment involving Occidental Petroleum, Occidental Chemical, were being headed to the very same chemical plant. Shintech, one of the other companies involved in the derailment, 3 of their train cars containing PVC plastic pellets derailed, they burned. And interestingly, those train cars were headed to a PVC pipe manufacturer in Pennsylvania, a company by the name of JM Eagle, who is actually one of the biggest manufacturers of PVC pipe here in the US and across the world. Shintech reported releasing more than 45,000 pounds of vinyl chloride into the air at their chemical facilities in 2021. Now, these companies are not alone. Across the country, we found that there are 19 vinyl chloride and PVC resin factories who together produce more than 10 billion pounds of vinyl chloride here in the United States on an annual basis. According to EPA, that may be as much as 20 billion pounds of vinyl chloride. And that's an awful amount of a known human carcinogen that's being produced in communities all across the US to make products like PVC plastic pipes. These facilities together reported releasing more than 400,000 pounds of vinyl chloride into the air in 2021. And again, this is to make cheap plastic PVC pipes. It's important to note that the number 1 use of PVC is in building materials, and the number 1 use of PVC and building materials is actually to make plastic piping. So there's massive amounts of this known human carcinogen that is being manufactured here in the United States and that is being released into frontline communities day in and day out that are being exposed to the very same chemicals that burned in the Ohio derailment. Here's a quick snapshot from our report that highlights the biggest emitters of vinyl chloride. This is information that these companies self-report to the US EPA toxic release inventory. Some of the other biggest producers, in addition to Oxy and Shintech, include Westlake, Formosa, and Orbia, or Mexichem. Westlake is the biggest releaser of vinyl chloride in the United States. The number one emitter of vinyl chloride is one of their plants in Calvert City, Kentucky, which actually has come under scrutiny by the US EPA for violating federal environmental safety laws. If you take a look at the report that we just published, we also include an interactive map where you can actually see where many of these facilities are located, and you can see how much vinyl chloride these facilities release into the surrounding communities. You can also zoom in and see where these plants are located and what sort of proximity they are into, how close they are to residential areas, how close they are to schools, how close they are to surface water bodies. So it's a really, we think, valuable resource. You can also see where these companies send their chlorinated waste. In our investigation, we found that the PVC industry on average burns and sends to incinerators and landfills more than 20 million pounds of chlorinated waste on an annual basis. They're sent to landfills, they're sent to incinerators, they're sent to cement kilns. And a concern is that when you burn massive amounts of chlorinated waste the way that the vinyl industry does, there's concern that toxic byproducts such as dioxins can be released into the environment. Another thing to note is that in our investigation, we also looked at the demographics for communities around these vinyl plastic production facilities, as well as the incinerators and the landfills and the cement kilns that burn and dispose of the industry's waste. And across the board, we found that there are over 370,000 US residents that live within a 3-mile radius of a vinyl chloride or PVC manufacturing plant or waste disposal facility. And on average, most of the people that live in these communities are folks of color or people that earn less income. So for example, on average, people that live within a 3-mile radius of these facilities, 63% of them people of color. That's compared to the national average of 41%. Additionally, if you take a look at the income for these folks that live within a 3-mile radius of these facilities, they earn on average 37% below the national average. So the production of vinyl chloride and PVC plastic to manufacture pipes is a major issue of environmental justice. Many of these plants have had significant impacts on frontline communities. There have been numerous communities that have been forced to relocate due to contamination, groundwater contamination, such as in Mossville, Louisiana, Rebeltown, Louisiana, as well as other communities. And one of the reasons that I mention this is because the Biden administration and this EPA has made a really significant commitment to environmental justice. But it doesn't really make sense for us to solve one problem, the issue of lead pipes, and create another problem. It does not make sense for the government to spend billions of dollars to install PVC pipes and contribute to massive environmental injustice in communities like Louisiana, Texas, and Kentucky. So in closing, we really need policy solutions to address this issue, to ensure that we're not solving the lead problem and creating another problem for environmental justice communities here in the United States. We need local governments to act, we need state governments to act, and we need the EPA to step in and to provide guidance to municipalities to avoid regrettable substitution. Also, we need big retailers, companies like the Home Depot, to enact policies to restrict the sale of products containing this dangerous, hazardous plastic. The good news is that there are safer alternatives that are out there. Safer solutions are within reach. We just need to create the political will for policymakers in government as well as corporate decision makers to do the right thing and to safeguard public health. This is a common sense issue. Solutions are within reach, and we just want to see our government and corporate decision makers to do the right thing. Thank you very much. And if you're interested, I think we put a link in the chat to the report that we published. Thanks a lot.
So what are the safer alternatives?
So thank you, Mike, for that. At this time, I'm going to share some recommendations, and then we will open it up for questions. This is essentially a conclusion. I encourage you, although this is recorded, to take a screenshot of this. That way you can have it readily available for you. But essentially, as government officials and the public move forward with replacing their lead service lines, these are some of the important questions that we should ask. What is the replacement pipe that you're considering? And have you considered safe alternatives to PVC? Number two, what data is available for the identities and levels of chemicals that have been found leaching from the pipes in the certification testing? 3, will the pipe that you consider include a liner? 4, if you're planning to use copper piping, see if recycled copper is available. And then 5, what is the breakdown of project cost? The cost of replacing piping, regardless of the type of piping used, tends to be one of the smaller costs of most lead service line replacement projects. So at this time, we will open the floor for questions. I'm going to ask that you raise your virtual hand. We have, quite a few participants, so we will not get to everyone's question, but we will do our best. I will start with those that are raising their hands, their virtual hands, and you can also put your questions in the chat if you prefer to just have them in the chat, and I'll read them and they can be answered. If you are a reporter, journalist, we ask that you state which outlet that you are representing. And if you know who you'd like your question to go to, I encourage you to share that as well. I'm going to go with Tamala Trestle.
Thank you, Angela. My question is, how can PVC even be considered a replacement at all? And I say this because I put PVC in from my back spigot down through the ground to get to my front yard so I could water my raised beds. And that PVC pipe has broken 3 times. So it degrades unlike a metal pipe. And so I'm just wondering about, and now granted, mine is a small 3/4 inch or 1 inch pipe that I put to go to the front yard. So it's a smaller PVC than I'd imagine they put in a service line. But still, I'm thinking like it's not going to, like, lead pipes are bad, but they've lasted for 100+ years. I don't know that PVC is going to last like that. What is your thoughts on this?
Well, I can take a shot at that, Tamala. I think the reason why some local governments are relying on PVC or CPVC pipe is because they think it's cheaper. And when you do the comparison of PVC pipe to recycled copper pipe or stainless steel pipe, it is less expensive. However, I really want to emphasize that you want to look at the total project cost, and the cost of the piping material is significantly less than the cost of labor and digging up the road and the sidewalk. And there's $15 billion in federal dollars to help subsidize this replacement. We hope even more in the future. And some states are also providing additional funding. And so when I hear that, some communities are considering PVC because it's cheap, we urge those local officials and the public to really look at the whole budget for the project.
Lydia Robertson.
Yes, thank you. This is great. I'm really glad I found this on Facebook. I want to ask if there is any movement toward destabilizing the PVC pipe industry for being put into people's homes, because I just moved to Massachusetts from New York City. And in New York City, 20 years ago, I renovated a house and everything. I took out all the lead pipes and I put in copper and steel and not 1 inch of PVC. But I just moved to Massachusetts and I'm building 2 houses, and they had never even heard of not using PVC, the plumbers, the professional plumbers. And I told them about the health risks and I insisted on copper. And they basically tried to talk me out of it all the way through. And I didn't have enough information until this seminar to really speak to it. But I did say all my water lines had to be, cold water lines had to be copper. And they think I'm crazy. So I would really like to see some, I think that we could make a big step forward if we also address this in people's homes, because if all the plumbers never even heard of using anything other than PVC in everywhere except New York City, I mean, it's almost impossible to get people to take the issue seriously when everybody is putting PVC pipes in their homes and have been. So I think that we need to, I mean, it's really terrifying to think that we are poisoning ourselves that way, you know, and anyway, that's my question. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. This is Judith Hank responding with Beyond Plastics. We know we have a lot of work to do to get this information into the hands of plumbers and other trade professionals. We did do a news conference last week, the same trio here of Dr. Swan and Mike Shade and Angela Marie Hutchinson and myself. USA Today covered the news conference, and it was on the front page of USA Today last week and other publications. But this is just the beginning on this. We will get this report out far and wide. We urge you to do the same. And we're receiving a lot of questions about the report and also some feedback. And we, we need your help on this webinar. We're a little NGO. We're not as big as you think we are. And we want to get the word out in partnership with others. And I am now making a note that we've got to particularly reach the plumbers unions. Thank you.
Can I just jump in there real quick? I just want to note that, here in New York, where some of us are at, the plumbers unions have actually been really supportive of efforts to restrict the use of PVC pipe. About 20 years ago or so here in New York, there was an effort that actually restricted the use of PVC pipe in developments above a certain threshold. And it was actually the plumbers unions, as well as the firefighters, that were really strong supporters of restricting the use of PVC pipe. One of the concerns that plumbers have, in addition to the range of issues that we're speaking to today, is that PVC cement, which is often used to join PVC pipe, can also contain other chemicals of high concern, including some chemicals that are actually quite hazardous, which can pose occupational health risks to plumbers on the job. So this is not only an environmental health issue from production and use, but also this can also be an occupational health hazard for plumbers, as well as first responders. As Judith noted, when PVC pipes burn in accidental building fires, that can pose really serious risks to firefighters and first responders. So this is not only an environmental health issue, this is also an important occupational safety and health issue for workers that are on the front lines of working with these materials day in and day out.
Thanks for that, Mike. Justin, you just need to unmute.
Thank you. I have several questions, but I'll try and stick to one or two. What is we talked about PVC and you use PVC almost interchangeably with CPVC. In terms of toxicity, are they considered to be similar? Or because CPVC is the one I'm familiar with that's used in water mostly, not PVC. So, you know, and there's a website I found called FlowGuard, which they sell the CPVC, and they make certain claims about how it's a very safe product. So I'm just wanting to get a little bit of information about the difference in terms of toxicity, carcinogenic properties between PVC and CPVC piping.
Shauna, you're on mute.
I just wanted to say that I wish I could answer that question, but I don't. I'm not the expert for that. But I suspect that they will have similar health effects because the chemicals are, there's, you know, huge overlap of the chemicals. But I don't know, Mike, do you know more about that?
One thing that I'll just note is that, you know, CPVC and PVC are very similar. You know, the primary difference is that CPVC actually has more chlorine in it. And one of the big concerns with PVC, which we didn't even really touch on yet, is that the production and the disposal of PVC can release hazardous byproducts like dioxins. So when vinyl is produced and also when it is eventually disposed of, cancer-causing dioxins can be released into the environment from accidental fires, from incineration, landfill fires, which according to EPA is a major source of dioxin. So the fact that CPVC has even more chlorine is a concern because there's evidence that that may actually lead to greater quantities of dioxins released into the environment, which are considered to be some of the most toxic chemicals on the planet. Dioxins are so dangerous. There's an international treaty that has targeted their phase out globally. So CPVC poses, in some respects, even greater concern because of the greater quantity of chlorine that's used in its manufacture.
And I was about to recommend, Justin, that you look at information from Healthy Buildings Network. And right when I was about to say that, Ryan Johnson with Healthy Buildings Network put in the chat that the additives used in PVC and CPVC pipes are very similar.
And those would be the chemicals that you touched on, those slew of other chemicals that are added to the pipes, like organotins or other chemicals.
Yes.
I'm sorry, could I ask one more question?
Let us go to a different person.
Sure.
At this time, let's see, we have a few more minutes. I'm gonna try to get to some of the questions in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and take Mark.
I'm going to be practical and talk about the green alternatives and get a little detail about them. There's certain ways to use copper, and you mentioned silver, and there's some better kind of plastic, but what else? Can you talk in detail about the practical alternatives?
Sure. So the things we are recommending as alternatives to PVC and CPVC piping for drinking water are first copper, and strong preference for recycled copper because there are significant environmental impacts from.
Judith, you're still muted.
Thanks. So copper, but preferably recycled copper. Ask for recycled copper first, and then after that, stainless steel.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get to a couple of the questions in the chat.
So pathetic.
Timothy would like to know, from Move Past Plastic, is there a plan to have federal government funding to replace these pipes forever instead of waiting for an infrastructure plan?
Well, the Infrastructure Act was already adopted by Congress last year. This is not Build Back Better. This is the Federal Infrastructure Act. So $15 billion, thankfully, was provided by the Congress and the president to flow to states and then local governments. It'll go to a state agency and then local governments apply for the money. But 15 billion is not enough. I describe it as a down payment. There's a nonprofit made up of 4,300 utilities called the American Water Works Association. They estimate that 60 billion is needed to replace the estimated lead service lines around the country. So, I used to work at the EPA. It takes time for the federal government to move money. So it's really good that this 15 billion was made available now. So you've got the financial systems in place. And what we really need is for Congress and the EPA to provide even more money. And the states can supplement what the federal government is providing. Environmental groups in New York, led by Rob Hayes at Environmental Advocates and Joan Larry Matthews at NRDC, are pushing the state of New York to provide supplemental funding. But the question for tonight is, you get the funding from the federal or state government to replace your lead service lines. What are you going to replace it with? And that's why we did this report, The Perils of PVC Plastic Pipes.
Thanks, Judith. Dominique is asking, can someone speak to reversibility of the endocrine damage from PVC and other assaults if a community changes from PVC? Is there hope of improvement?
Shauna, you're on mute.
I can just quickly say that the chemicals of most concern have a short half-life. They're in the body for a short time. They're not forever chemicals. So there's a good hope of improving the situation by making these changes.
I will go back to a couple of the hands raised. David?
Hi. My question is if you have looked into any alternatives to PVC for distribution mains. All the districts that I do work with are pretty on board with copper for the service lines in mainly, I work in the Denver metro area, but all their engineering standards call out PVC for water mains, and the water still has to go through there to get to the service line. So do you have alternatives there?
That is a really good point. And we focused on lead service lines, David. What do you think?
Well, I'm not a scientist, but I mean, I've seen ductile iron as an alternative. I just don't know if that's, suitable and preferable. Yeah, I know it has some corrosive issues in some soils, but yeah, I'm no expert.
Yeah, I think that needs some further study and analysis. I'm certainly not ready to comment on that tonight, but thank you. And good to hear that Denver is, you said, mostly for the service lines you're replacing with copper.
Yep. One thing to just note here is that we've in this report that Beyond Plastics put out, we put out certain, I was one of the reviewers of the report, and we put out certain questions and policy recommendations, and we have certain answers, but we may not have every answer. And this is one of the reasons why we need the EPA to step in and provide guidance to municipalities, cities, to states, so that they can make more informed decisions about these issues. We're relatively small nonprofit organizations, limited budgets. We really need the federal government to do their job and provide meaningful guidance so that local governments, state governments can make informed decisions about using more environmentally preferable materials that are appropriate for various applications. And that's one of the things that we think is critically needed. If the federal government is going to be spending $15 billion here just to start, the government really needs to be providing meaningful guidance so that local governments can make better, smarter decisions on some of these issues.
And please also remember to keep muted if you haven't been called on to speak. I just want to make sure that everybody can be heard.
Thanks for that. We'll take two more questions. Tanya Garment.
Thanks. Okay, so the EPA, working on the EPA to do standards for what kind of pipes are used with the funding, right? What about locally? I live in New York, in Ulster County. I was able to speak about and tell them about this webinar because I just happened to be attending the Climate Smart Kingston meeting. But have you had any success, or do you have any ideas in terms of making legislation maybe at the county level to encompass a bunch of municipalities to direct them? Is that possible? Because is that
Mhm.
sort of legislation?
Yes, it definitely is. You could have state legislation, you could have a county bill, you could have a city bill. The city of Kingston could adopt legislation that specifies that they don't want PVC plastic pipe or CPVC plastic used for replacing lead service lines. I think that's a very constructive suggestion, and you should give the city of Kingston and your new amazing Ulster County executive, Jen Metzger, a copy of this report. Jen Metzger used to be a state senator, and I'm certainly not speaking for her, but I would guess that she would be very open to hearing about this issue because she has a long and distinguished record of caring for environmental protection.
And our last question is from the chat. Renee Carver says, certainly PVC should not be used anywhere in the water supply network. Do you have suggestions for what to do about the wastewater network?
Yeah, I mean, we focused on drinking water because of the obvious concerns about human health. But when you hear Mike Shade's presentation from Toxic Free Future about the impact of PVC production in environmental justice communities, you can make the case that it should be avoided. Cancer Alley, it's a terrible phrase, but that is what a stretch of the Mississippi River is called in Louisiana, has significantly higher health problems linked to the concentration of petrochemical facilities. We know it's going to be hard to convince states and local governments not to use PVC and CPVC for drinking water. So we're starting on that. And I think the wastewater issue is an important one as well. I think perhaps not as immediate an issue because of the federal funding that is flowing right now for drinking water pipes.
Thank you for that, Judith. Well, thank you all so much. We appreciate you taking the time out this afternoon and evening to participate with us. If you have further questions, you can reach out to Beyond Plastic, to their team. We encourage you to connect with all of these organizations on social media as well to stay abreast of, the latest breaking news and reports and information. Thank you again.